Welcome to episode 94 of the BCF ORG podcast, The Business of Business. I'm Brian Fisher. In the previous episode, 93, our guest was Jim Stevenson, discussing strategy, transformation, and growth. This podcast series is targeted to business owners and C-suite executives. As a business owner, I founded, grew, and sold a successful industrial automation distributorship. This podcast reflects my 34 years as a business owner and subsequent years as a business mentor and consultant. It focuses on the various subjects and topics to help you run a successful, profitable business. They're approximately 15 minutes long, so you can listen while commuting. Hopefully, you'll find one or two takeaways to implement per episode. Today's episode discusses executive communication with Loreta Tarozaite. Primarily based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Loreta Tarozaite is the founder and CEO of Loreta Today, helping organizations and their leaders create a powerful, consistent, and authentic presence across all touchpoints. Loreta helps technology companies in transition to effectively manage the fast-moving growth stage that comes with business success. Before immigrating to the United States in 2003, Loreta was a TV news anchor in Lithuania, a career she dreamed about since she was a child watching the nightly news with her parents. Faced with the challenge of not yet being able to legally work in the U.S., Loreta had to transition from the busy, adrenaline-filled environment of live TV news to become a video storyteller and video producer while focusing on building her professional network and expertise in Silicon Valley. Through networking and interactions within the technology space, Loreta discovered that many technology executives and founders struggle with telling their stories, being concise and clear in their communications, unable to humanize their brands, companies, and make them relatable. She became passionate to help solve that problem, help executives and companies elevate their personal brand and company presence. Let's welcome Loreta Tarozaite. Loreta, welcome to the BCF ORG podcast, The Business of Business.
Thank you, Brian. Very happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us today, Loreta. Loreta, I'm always interested in people's stories. What's your background in becoming the founder CEO of Loreta Today?
Well, I come from Lithuania. That's where I was born and raised until I turned 20-something years old. And then that's when we moved to the United States. But from the very beginning of my childhood, I've always wanted to be in television. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I had that dream. But every time I would watch nightly news on the Lithuanian, prime television channel, I would always be telling to my parents, I will be one day sitting there. I will be one day doing the same thing that the news anchors were doing. So, of course, my parents didn't believe it, and they took it more like a childish joke. But somehow all of that materialized in my life. And through that journey of being a TV news anchor, a TV news reporter, and then converting those skills into visual storytelling through video for corporations, for businesses here in the United States, I realized that the communication is one of the most important things, when we are trying to tell a story, when we try to establish a brand or your executive presence, through different mediums. And to me, this visual communication along with a verbal communication has always gone hand in hand because of my background in television. So to me, it's not only the words, it's also the visual aspect of it.
This episode's topic is executive communication. How do you help executives up-level their presence and become more relatable on stage or during their presentations?
Yeah. So when it comes to executives specifically, there's several types of executives as I define, right? There's entrepreneurs who are starting their careers, who are trying to figure out, and then there's the established founders who are already who already know what it takes to be somebody who's running the business, and then there's aspiring executives and established executives. So each of these categories kind of need different type of coaching and different type of help. So if I were to focus a little bit more on the aspect of entrepreneurs or founders who are running startups, right? So when the startup is on the growth stage, for example, it becomes much more important for these founders to become a little bit more well outspoken, understand their story, talk to media in a more streamlined manner. Don't get scared of the media or on stage, or being on stage or be in front of the camera. So become a little bit more versed in how they use different types of communication tools to get the message out. And same for aspiring corporate leaders who want to be in that C-level suite, or even established leaders. That crosses over, right? So nobody's born to become a good communicator or a good storyteller. So they have to learn certain tools and skills, right? So the way I help, when it comes to stage presence versus camera presence, for example, or how to talk to media, again, each of these avenues is very, very different. So stage presence, when somebody is on stage and they have to tell a story, obviously the dynamics and feedback from the audience is very important. And a lot of people freak out to be on stage because of that feedback that they receive. They get very self-conscious. They stress. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to put their hands. They have the slides that are very, very, almost like cheat sheets versus inspirational images. So they really don't have that skill set of how to tell the story and not focus so much on what's on the slide, but rather connect with the audience. And whatever feedback they get from that audience, you have to think on the spot and kind of reciprocate, with either a comment or a joke or something like that. So stage presence is something very different than on-camera presence. So when it comes to on-camera presence, that kind of crosses into different avenues. It could be TV interview. So that touches a little bit of media. It could be executive communication with your employees through executive communication programs, or, even brand level and corporate level storytelling through video. So video and on-camera presence coaching is completely different than stage. On camera, as we know, it's almost a communication one-on-one. And of course, if you're good on stage, it doesn't necessarily translate that you're going to be excellent on camera because of the difference of the two mediums. And when somebody talks on camera, you have to learn to not be afraid of that little recorder button that you see, and really connect with the lens. Again, it depends on if it's an interview style, if it's a direct to camera conversation or message delivery. There's always tricks, how we can incorporate all of that and find the comfort. My goal in general, when I work with executives, no matter which type of presentation or which type of coaching they need, is to always help them be themselves, so that whatever they are on stage, whatever they are on camera, they are the same real person when people meet them. So there cannot be a facade. Oh, this is my stage voice. This is my camera look. It has to be the same person. So I always, dig deep when it comes to one-on-one coaching to uncover what are the struggles, what are the problems, what's that roadblock? Is it too self-consciousness? Is it fear? Is it, being afraid of what others are going to think? What is that prevents them having that confidence when communicating through different mediums?
Following up on that, being on camera, what are some of the biggest pitfalls executives make when they're speaking on video, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, the biggest probably, I wouldn't say pitfall, but maybe lack of understanding that they have, right? Especially those who have not been coached how to talk through different mediums. Sometimes they're like, oh, where do I look? Do I look to you? Do I look to the camera? And then it ends up, that when they have a conversation, let's say with a journalist or a producer for a video story, their eyes start wandering around. And like I mentioned earlier, because camera is so one-on-one consumption of content, people consume video content pretty much one-on-one, unless it's a movie and everybody sits in the same room and they have a conversation. But a lot of times, video content that we see online, it's consumed on the mobile phone, on your personal, laptop or PC. It's usually one-on-one consumption. So that connection to the eyes is very, very important. And if, let's say, somebody is interviewing you, so that connection to the eyes is more to the interviewer versus the camera lens. And so a lot of times, the pitfalls that the executives fall into is they just don't know if they're not guided where to look and how to converse or how to deliver the message. Their eyes start wandering, which then to the viewer appears that they're lacking confidence. They're looking somewhere. They're not focused. They're disjointed, and that's not the image we want to portray when we're using video as a communications tool.
We're speaking with Loreta Tarozaite, founder, CEO of Loreta Today. Loreta, in what ways do you help companies create alignment with the 3 Ps: people, process, and presence?
Oh, that's a broad topic, but I will try to distill it. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, when I look at at a company or executive presence, it's always visual representation as well as communication aspect, verbal. And a lot of times, let's say a visual representation and verbal representation are clashing. The most likely, there's misalignment inside the organization that prevents for that streamlined story to be put out. So the 3 Ps are people, process, presence. So when I come in, I take a look at, okay, how are the processes within marketing communications function? And again, to kind of set the stage, it's not across the board in the organization. My playground is marketing communications departments. So I always look, okay, well, if your company or you do not have a strong presence online, how do people know inside the organization? Does the team even know what the goals are of the company, right? How is the information internally flowing from product teams to communication teams or marketing teams? Are they all aligned and understand what's happening with the business so that those stories could be pushed out, so that those opportunities could be found for the leader to be invited for an interview or into a podcast or into a media TV, interview or a publication for an article. So it's always, to me, how do people get the information? What's the process of getting that information inside the organization? And how does that impact the presence that we see inside and outside the company? And all these 3 Ps, they cannot happen in silos. They all go together. By fixing one or two, you by default elevate the third.
Loreta, what results or lessons learned have you seen with executives that have implemented your recommendations?
Well, there's often a lot of fear of change that I've observed. Whenever you present something new to the company who's not used to change, there's a lot of fear and anxiety going on. But by taking small steps, they start getting used to the idea of that little change. And especially when they start seeing the impact, they become more confident and comfortable with that change that I bring to the table. And then let's say if we start with small steps, some 2 or 3 years later, they start asking for the same things that I was pitching, in the beginning, because they start seeing the value. Okay, so it's sometimes, depending on which stage the company is in, if it's a more established organization that needs that upgrade, then they're a little bit more fearful. If it's a startup who's used to a little bit more dynamic environment, they're going to be more open to that change. But nonetheless, there's always fear of the change because you don't know what that will bring until you test it out.
We're speaking with Loreta Tarozaite, founder, CEO of Loreta Today. Loreta, is there anything I've not asked that you'd like to add?
I don't think so, Brian. I think you asked all the right questions, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate giving me the platform to express, what I do and how I do it. And hopefully that resonates with your audience. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, you're welcome. Loreta, how can people get in contact with you?
My world is LinkedIn. So even by first and last name, Loreta Tarozaite, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my website, www.loreta.today. And just to note, Loreta is spelled with 1 T because in Lithuanian language, we don't have double letters. So it's Loreta.today, Loreta with 1 T. And you will find my information there, my LinkedIn link, as well as a free downloadable presence checklist that you can fill it out and see where you stand or where your company stands when it comes to presence level. If you wanted, to reach out to me and after you fill out that assessment, obviously I can help out and see what steps need to be taken next.
Loreta, thank you for joining us today on the BCF ORG podcast, The Business of Business.
Thank you so much, Brian.
My sincere thanks to Loreta Tarozaite for joining us today. Managing the performance of your company is one of the most important things you do as a leader. This podcast is on YouTube and over 20 podcast directories. Subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast. In search, type BCF ORG. Be sure to leave a space between BCF and ORG. If you'd like to reach out to me for business consulting or with any questions, comments, ideas, or potentially be a guest like Loreta, please go to bcforg.com. There's a red Contact Us button in the middle of the homepage. A LinkedIn symbol's on the upper right. Click on that if you'd like to see my profile. All the podcasts are available by clicking on the website podcast page in the reference bar. These podcasts will be released the first and third Tuesday each month. In the next episode, 95, our guest will be Jason Urazi discussing building your future. In business, running a successful, profitable business is the ultimate scorecard. You're never done and can always be better. It tends to be more fun than work, frustrating at times, but can be very rewarding. From BCF ORG Corp., I'm Brian Fisher, wishing you the best. Thanks.